I'm so glad to be, hearing about this from you, because I've talked to some Christians who have done the same thing on the Christian side of things, like moving from one church to another to a more welcoming or affirming church. So it's nice to hear that also from the Jewish perspective.
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing. Like, there's not this like monolith of, all Jewish people are unaccepting or all Jewish people are accepting. It's
not everybody puts up that wall.
Yeah. Literally.
Yeah.
Now, interestingly enough, so I mentioned I used to live in the most religious part of Houston.
Sure, okay.
So we call it like black hat frum.
Okay.
Because the men wear black hats.
Okay.
And they all have very long beards. They all have a million kids.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not New York.
No, I understand.
Everyone from New York comes to Houston.
Okay. So this is one of the places where they can sort of migrate to out of New York or something.
Yeah, a lot of people from New York and California are coming here.
Okay.
And specifically to this community.
Yeah.
Because they have more affordable large houses.
Yes.
But also you're coming from New York, so you can afford it.
And then they have a lot of kids, so they need those big houses. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So they're also within the synagogue's range of areas
Sure.
that you can be in. So, I used to live there, and my siblings were actually from New York. Some of them are from New York. And so they've had to adapt to some ideas. But we're walking around that space, like you walk around the street, and I definitely had people whispering. A lot of the kids I used to babysit.
Okay.
So I used to babysit the kids.
Interesting. So when they get older, they
ignore me on the street.
They're suddenly like, you're a stranger?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Because as they were getting older, so was I. I had also cut off my hair, and they would see me.
But you're the same person.
I'm the same person, absolutely. But, whenever I went over to another person's house, especially like a religious family, I typically wear a skirt back then.
Okay.
Especially when I'd first come out as gay.
You're trying to, once again, make them more comfortable.
I don't want to make them uncomfortable in their own home.
Mm-hmm, right.
But if you're going to come to my house, nah.
Forget about it.
I'm wearing shorts and an oversized shirt. You'll be lucky if I put on a bra for this. We had a rabbi come around last night, 2 nights ago. And I was just like, I'm in my pajamas, but sure, come in.
Well, I mean, you live across the street from the synagogue, so...
Actually, this was a rabbi from out of town.
Okay.
I didn't know who he was.
Okay.
But apparently my stepmother knew him.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a difficult line of like, what am I going to be uncomfortable with and comfortable with dressing and acting like, as well as how about other people?
Yeah.
And so like you come into the synagogue, and I remember going in, it was like 2 years ago, not even. And oftentimes women will only speak to the women, and the men will only speak to the women.
Right.
The men. It's not set in stone. It's just kind of a social way
it's
of
a cultural
communicating.
thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, it was weird because I think some men saw me as a man, and they would say like, Chag Sameach, which is like a good holiday, it's like the greeting. And then like women would also talk to me about like their kids and stuff.
Okay.
And I was like, this is really weird.
So you're really getting the genderqueer, non-binary
absolutely.
experience there.
Yeah. Like that gender attribution mark was all over.
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, this is weird. But
Did that feel good to you though? I mean, you're kind of like relating to everybody.
Yeah. It did. But in a sense, I was also very, very nervous to just be in that space.
Okay.
And so it was for Rosh Hashanah, which, the head of the Jewish New Year, you hear the shofar blowing, which is like this ram's horn.
Right.
And the big thing is to hear the shofar. Like, even if you don't pray, you hear the shofar.
Sure.
So I went into synagogue, and I remember standing at the door. They had the mechitza, they had the partition, and it was actually in a change of location because they were going to have a larger number of people, and so they didn't want to have it in their normal location because there wasn't going to be enough seats. So they had a change of location that everyone could still walk to, and they had the partition, but they had a weird thing going on where the women had to like go around the men's side, and the men could still see the women going around to the men's side. Around to the women's side. And they had like a whole debate about this afterwards. Believe me, it was very controversial to have this partition like that. But I remember standing there being like, I don't really want to go to either side.
So they're sort of circumambulating the wall.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was weird. It was a weird space, and then they don't do that anymore.
Okay.
But I remember standing at the door of it being like, I don't really want to go in. And my step-sibling was also there. My step-sibling has come out and is also very queer.
Okay.
And I remember they were standing next to me, and they were like, I don't want to go in either. I said, okay. And then one of our family friends, who I knew was very queer affirming, came up and was like, hey, do you want me to do you want to come with me to the women's side? I was like, I don't know about that. So I just stood there and it was chill. I heard the shofar blowing and then I went home. I was like, I'm here for that, then I'm going. And that's all I could deal with for that day.
Yeah.
At this retreat, at the Shabbaton, it was so much easier. You know, you were in the space and they didn't have the partition.
Right.
Which for some people...
You don't have to do all that thinking about
right.
like, oh, am I going to put myself over here?
Right.
You know.
And so interestingly, it's like I had another friend from New Jersey, another person, and they had always grown up in a really, really religious environment. So they had never been in a prayer space that didn't have that partition.
Okay.
Which was a very...
Were they lost then? Like they didn't know where to go? Or?
It's not they didn't know where to go, but it's just that they weren't used to seeing men when they prayed.
Okay.
And so it was a bit strange for them, but I was very glad to be in that space. So I didn't really care.
Well, I think it's good to, if something is slightly uncomfortable, but it's, no harm is happening. I think that's actually like a really good thing. That's like when somebody's growing into like noticing that there's different things in the world, that there's different realities, not just what they grew up with,
right,
but something else. Oh, this is strange, but let's see what this is about.
And here's the interesting part, actually, now that you mentioned this. If my synagogue's very small, so the chance of other queer people being there is a little more slim.
Yeah.
But being an out queer person in the Jewish community means that occasionally you see other Jews that are okay with coming out to you.
Yeah, right.
And so you
become like a beacon.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. Right.
And so, I remember being in our old house, we have the dog. He loves playing.
That's interesting too, because you're so young, but you probably have people of all ages coming to you, I would think. Yeah.
Yeah. And so actually, just for some background, I came out maybe 4.5 years ago.
Yeah. Right.
Back when I was starting high school. And I came out as gay, and then about a year later came out as non-binary. I never called myself lesbian. I was like, this term does not fit me.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of baggage with it too.
Yeah. I'll call myself a dyke though.
Yeah. Dykes are cool. Dykes are cool.
Yeah. So it's a weird dichotomy there. But I remember coming out and then, I was very obviously queer. My room had a giant pride flag.
Sure.
Like, people knew I was gay. And so we had a family friend that would come over with her dog because she loved playing. The dogs loved playing together. They absolutely loved each other. It was the funniest thing. Anyway, we were walking back when I was walking with her back to her place. And she actually came out to me. And I thought that was really interesting because she lived in this world, the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community is very much a bubble. It's like this monolithic bubble.
Yeah.
And so
they have a lot of rules. Yeah.
So she actually came out to me, and I thought that was really cool. And I was like, all right, that's cool. And I do wonder if she'll ever, end up with a woman. But there were every so often, and actually recently I ended up meeting two queer people that came from out of town, moved to Houston, and were looking for other queer people their age.
Right.
And I was like, all right, cool.
Yeah.
So
I'll tell you, I had the same experience up in Fairbanks, Alaska, which is kind of a remote community. I mean, it's a city way up there. And we had a PFLAG booth up there, and I volunteered for it. And what was great about that, and this was at the... I don't know if it was State Fair. It might have been the State Fair. They have the State Fair in a couple places. It's not just one State Fair. But anyway, there was a fair, and there was our PFLAG booth, and there were youngsters who were coming into town from really rural places, like not even rural, like down here in Texas, like way out in Alaska, at the end of roads kind of thing. Coming in with their goats that they had raised, whatever, their rabbits, whatever, and. We had a couple that came by the table and were like, I just wanted to let you know that this is who I am too. And it was just like, I was like, oh, wow. I felt so happy about that we could be there for these youngsters who just needed to say something about who they were.
That's awesome.
It's so beautiful. I feel like really emotional about that,
Right.
Oh, so great.
And you became like that one person in the space where... who knew queer people could be.
That's right. That's right.
So yeah, it's the same kind of thing in the Jewish community, right? You have that one person, And so
You're that one person.
so actually through Keshet, we had that Discord server going on with youth, and I was on it, and I was speaking to someone, and we had different chats for different.
I was just kidding, by the way. You're not that one person, but
there are many of us.
Yeah.
But there were different chats for different areas of the U.S. as well as outside of the U.S. because we have some Canadians.
Okay.
And I was speaking in the Southwest channel. Was it called Southwest? I don't know. And then I ended up speaking to someone, and I found out they actually lived a few blocks away from me in the Jewish community.
Great.
And I was like, hold up, a trans person living in this area. Well, we've got to talk.
Yeah.
And so we ended up meeting a few times. Specifically on Shabbat, actually, we would meet up by a bridge, and then I'd probably go to his place, and we just chat.
Yeah.
I met his parents; they were really sweet at the time.
Great.
I found out later that was kind of a mirage. They were not as sweet as I thought.
Oh, I see.
But it was really cool because I ended up being like that one queer Jewish person that kid knew.
Yeah.
And I knew he had a tough time coming out. And the synagogues weren't the most accepting place.
Yeah. And sometimes I'll tell you, people will come out of the same community, like whether it's religious or whatever, a work environment, and they will sometimes meet each other and recognize each other in queer or trans spaces. And it's like, oh, you too. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, the Jewish Federation of Houston actually had an event.
Yeah.
And it was a hearing forum. They just wanted to listen to the community, figure out what their needs were, where they could be met.
Right.
And so they actually held it.
There's a lot happening.
Yeah.
I mean, geez.
They actually held it at the Mantra Center.
Yeah, okay.
Really great. But I ended up seeing someone from my synagogue that I knew. My synagogue is like maybe closer to 20 families. Yeah. It's very, very small.
Yeah.
But I ended up seeing someone. I was like, oh, I recognize you.
Yeah.
We know each other.
One of my guests in Oklahoma, an intersex man, knew another intersex person, and they saw each other at a peer support group.
That's really cool.
And they had worked at like the same place, and they were like, oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's really funky.
Yeah.
And even like you even have the opposite where like in the Jewish community, so we have this joke, kind of a Jewish geography joke, where every Jew knows every other Jew.
Okay, yeah.
And
it is a small community, yeah.
It's a small population, but I'm talking even like nationally, like we all know each other. We know people in common. Sure. We pass by each other on the same street at the specific time.
I'll tell you, the state of Alaska is like that as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I'm somebody who moves a lot, so I'm not used to this, like kind of everybody kind of knowing each other. So it almost puts you on like your best behavior all the time. Yeah, it does. And I'm not used to being on my best behavior because of being an activist. I feel like sometimes activism has brought out some, not always, but sometimes a kind of aggression that will sometimes go into my personal life and doesn't work too well. You know what I mean? Do you know exactly?
Like a bit of a, not a Karen, but like
just
bit
fight,
of a,
like too much fighting.
Right.
Like it becomes like it just invades your personal life a little bit too much.
Right.
So sometimes I have to be like, oh, wait a second. Okay, I'm bringing activism here, and this is not. This
it was
is
interesting
because
like
I'm asking somebody out on a date. I'm not,
So it's interesting because like so I have an Instagram account that I'm pretty active on.
Okay.
And I have a lot of different people following it. So I have people from like previous jobs, progressive work.
Sure.
I've got school trustees and judges following me.
Right, because you've been all over the place.
And then I also have like friends.
Sure.
My partner, like people
like
more personal.
Friends.
Yeah. And so it's very
friends.
interesting because I tell people like, hey, if you're going to follow me on my Instagram, you're going to follow on your own accord.
Okay.
You can always mute my stories. You can always like block me, I guess.
Yeah.
If you really want to.
Yeah.
But because you're watching my stories, I'm not going to cater them to you.
Right.
I'm not going to censor my stuff.
It's also interesting because you're growing up in this, right? I mean, you're part of this age of computers and social media and whatnot. I'm a little bit older than that, so I had a different sort of growing up, right? So it's interesting because you need social outlets, and oftentimes social outlets are where people are being more vulnerable, right? They're talking about like their inner dialogue and, maybe they want some support or something like that. But then also you're a public person, right? And you have judges and superintendents following you. So how do you balance that? Because that seems a little tricky.
So,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm very aware of like if you search my name on Google, what are you actually going to find? But other than that, my social media is private.
Yeah.
I don't let anyone follow my page without me having to know who they are.
Right.
And if I met you virtually, that's one thing, that's fine. But I'm not going to let your friend of a friend of a friend follow me.
Which is something that people do. Like, they just go click, 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 click.
Absolutely, because you want the followers.
Yeah.
So I'm very much aware of, like, I don't ever want to do anything specifically for social media. Like, I'm not going to a rally. I'm not going to the Capitol to post about it.
Okay.
I'm also not posting stuff to count how many likes I get or how many
So
people
you don't
see
do
my story.
things as stunts.
Yeah.
For your own personal notoriety.
Yeah.
I can tell, because
I
you're
don't
just
want that.
really active. You're truly active.
No, but there are some times that I'll, like, go to march or something, and I'm like, I'm not going to post about this. I'll post the flyer to try and get more people to come.
Sure.
But there are times that I'm
It sounds like you're not
posting.
trying to make, like, a media circus around yourself.
Yeah.
And in fact, I mean, it's already coming to you. The media is coming to you, so you don't even need to do that.
Yeah, like, the large newspapers and stuff
Yeah.
are one thing, and that's completely separate.
Yeah.
And that's just because I am a voice in the community.
Right.
And I obviously don't speak for everyone.
Right.
But I can at least provide one perspective, and sometimes that's what they want.
Right.
But in terms of my social media, first of all, I don't go on Twitter, which is a weird one. I
No,
go
it's good.
occasionally if I find a Twitter that I really a tweet that I really like. But I try and stay off of Twitter.
Well, it's so open. That's the good thing about it, and a bad thing.
It feels like the 2019 the 2020 presidential debate, except every single person in the nation's involved in it.
Yes.
It feels like that.
Yes.
And they're debating on every single possible topic
That's
ever.
right. That's right. Well, there's too much abuse on there.
Oh.
And especially since Elon Musk took over, I mean, he got rid of all any sort of safeguard, you know. I mean, it was pretty minimal to begin with, but now it's just like completely gone.
Yeah, social media is like the biggest debate. And actually, fun fact, even on this
Yeah.
campus, you can't access TikTok on the
Interesting.
Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Yeah. So don't try and scroll on
that's-
your For You page.
That's because they're worried about China or something like that,
Yeah.
right? But
I'm not quite sure. I don't post
Yeah.
on TikTok.
Yeah.
I have like maybe 5 followers.
Yeah.
They're like friends. But yeah, so I still like prioritize actual like in-person or virtual encounters and conversations with people. I don't I'll communicate on social media as like a messaging forum, but
just advertising events.
yeah, it's a lot. Most of my story is advertising events. Sometimes it'll be like for work, and sometimes they'll have like, hey, we want to do a social media campaign, post this specifically with this hashtag, and that I'll do.
Yeah.
But
you're just one person among many.
right?
who
But
do that, yeah.
you know, I do know who follows me, and a lot of great people follow me that might go to these events or might see this post and actually take it to heart. So I am very cautious. Sometimes I do post very unhinged stuff though, and that's one of those times where
What
I'm
would
like,
be unhinged? I don't know.
I'm trying to think of a good one that I posted lately.
Doesn't even have to be a good one. What's a bad one? What's a minor one?
Oh, okay. Here's a random one.
Sure.
And this is a fantastic topic.
Okay.
I put a little. I was like, hey,
Is it something I'm going to
opinion.
understand?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
I said, if you were only ever boycotting Chick-fil-A, that is performative activism.
Okay, sure.
And so I posted that. I actually didn't get any hate for it, which was weird. But I posted that. That wasn't so unhinged. Here's another unhinged post, for example. And
Your unhinged does not sound that unhinged.
No,
by the way.
just wait. So, I posted a few different stories about the benefits of period sex.
Okay.
And like, I don't know why. That night I was like, oh, I hate my period. I'm just gonna post about this because it's a fun topic. And I remember
that might have been too much for some people, like the judge or whatever.
So anytime I'm gonna post something like that, the first story is always like, hey, I'm about to talk about this.
Okay.
If you don't want it, just skip over this.
I see.
But yeah, like I know that
Warning,
Trusty saw
warning.
that. My mom saw that.
Yeah, sure.
But my mom's also really.
But
chill
this
about it.
is something that AFAB people do have to deal with, and their partners. So it's not all that big of a deal, actually.
I actually wasn't with anyone at the time, but I was just like, this is a fun topic.
Yeah, sure.
But also, like, I've, a fantastic something that's going on right now is also like the censorship of what's being taught in sex ed in the classrooms, and that's something I've been heavily involved in. So I actually, fun fact, I was the health TA, the teacher's assistant for my for a health class back. The students that I was teaching were freshmen. I was a senior.
Sure. Okay. I didn't know they did that in high schools. I didn't realize they had like
they have health
students that are teaching assistants.
Some schools do that. Mine doesn't usually, and most of the time, any time a student wants to do a TA, it's usually for an engineering class. But I got a special exception, I guess.
Sure. To help with the math or whatever in the engineering.
Yeah, because it's a lot for a teacher to do. So sometimes they'll have the older kids do it.
Sure.
But this was it was one of those situations where we didn't really know what my position would be and what I'd be doing. So we just go along with it and try our best and kind of make it up as we go.
So they kind of recognized your expertise.
Not really. Well,
No?
the teacher did. The teacher really liked me, and she was the one that was like, hey, this person wants to be in my class as a TA. I'm cool with that.
Okay.
Let's make it happen. And the school
So
was like,
you
sure.
approached the teacher.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I was like, I really want to do this. So, because I had I'm not supposed to say this on camera, but I taught a little bit of sex ed back at Hatch.
Sure.
As well as with Kesh Ed at their Shabbatona. I taught there. They always have a sex ed activity programming.
Sure.
And actually, fun fact, when doing the condom demonstration, I'd broken the condom by accident. That one, which is not a good look.
But it shows how fragile they are.
Yeah. So
that's a good lesson.
Not one of my proudest moments.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I remember being in this class, and I was a few months before being in this class, I'd actually testified at the State Board of Education because they were finally revising their health education curriculum, including sex ed. And so we were trying to get consent put in. We wanted kids to learn about consent. Yes. I know, it's so crazy. And then we also were trying to...
That should be the first thing to learn.
That should have been taught in kindergarten.
Yes.
Absolutely. And then we were also trying to get some information about like LGBTQ plus people. Like, hey, there's birth control. Also, we were trying to get birth control put in. We wanted like people to know about not getting pregnant and not getting STDs.
Right.
Which is not a conversation every parent has with their kids.
Right.
Fun fact.
Right.
And so that, and also the dental dams and being gay is okay kind of conversation we wanted. So in Texas, we call it a don't say gay state because you are not allowed to, or no, it's a no promo homo law.
What?
Don't say gay, something else.
I've
no
never
promo homo.
I don't know what that means.
So what that means is essentially the health teacher, it's not actually in the TEKS, which is the standard curriculum that they're supposed to teach, but it's in the, it's in some like penal or health and safety code where a teacher has to say that being gay is bad. According to Texas law, it is illegal. You have a bad lifestyle.
A teacher has to say that.
A health teacher in Texas a public health school teacher is required to say that.
Now,
most of them don't. A lot of them realize that's BS.
Yeah.
And also, they are required to tell the students that gay sex is illegal in Texas, which it is. It's just Lawrence v. Texas federally made it so that you can't arrest people on that basis. You can't charge people with that. So...
Because in consensual sex, there's not like a victim and there's no crime there.
Right. So we're kind of like, gay sex is okay. But teachers essentially are required to say that.
Yeah.
Many don't.
Yeah.
The teacher I was working with absolutely did not. She was like, we're not telling the kids that. They can be gay. And I was like, all right, that's cool. This teacher was very progressive.
I had no idea that was going on.
Many states have it, actually.
That's so strange.
I don't know specifically, but there were quite a few states that have the no promo homo laws.
Wow.
So we were trying to get that repealed because that would be a legislative session thing. But we were trying to get them to write in the TEKS, hey, you can talk about being gay.
Yeah.
You can tell kids that that's a thing.
Yeah.
And so are trans people. They're also a thing.
Yeah.
And so the result was they ignored like 90% of what we said. But they did actually add in a few pieces of information about like birth control pills, condoms, the patch, maybe the shot.
You're talking about hormone replacement?
Yeah. Okay. So they added in a few things. But they're still very much preaching abstinence.
Yeah.
So they called it an abstinence plus education.
Okay.
So yes, abstain and don't have sex until marriage. But if you happen to, here are a few options.
Okay.
Now, we're not talking dental dams here. God forbid you mention a dental dam.
Yeah.
But they have that, and that was a small win. But each district writes its own sort of curriculum. They're like, hey, you have to follow TEKS, but also this and this. And so we were trying to...
That's why that takeover is bad.
Yeah, the takeover would erase those.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, in HISD, you have to now teach about condoms, but you can't demonstrate how to put a condom on.
Okay.
So don't think about the banana and the condom
So don't
situation.
even... We'll tell you they exist, but not how to use them.
Now, here's where the interesting part about being a TA comes in. I'm not a teacher at that school.
Okay.
I'm not an HISD employee.
You're not a state employee.
I can stand at the front of the classroom and hand out condoms.
Yes.
And I can demonstrate how to use a condom.
Excellent.
With the teacher just verbally instructing.
That's right.
And so
Excellent.
I actually ended up handing out condoms to those freshmen.
Great.
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 They loved it. They probably won't actually use them because they were nerds. A lot of them were just like, "Oh, condom, yay! I'm so grown up."
Sure.
It's
a balloon.
Oh my god! I told them do not blow up them as balloons. Like in terms of consent, my teacher was like, "We got to teach about consent. We're doing this." And one of the students had asked me a question that was really shocking, and so I ended up kind of educating them and re-educating them and making sure they were very clear on what consent meant.
Yeah, right.
And also, something to emphasize in these classrooms was that what consent isn't necessarily sexual. It's not always sexual in a sexual situation. It's literally shaking someone's hand.
Yeah, right.
At a business meeting.
Or being too close to them or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trauma dumping in the McDonald's,
Asking weird questions of them that are like none of your business.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was definitely a very important lesson, and I fear for the students that didn't have as progressive as of a teacher, and that either got misinformation or didn't get that information.
Right. Or were told that you can't be gay or whatever it was.
Now, actually, so fun fact, I found out about a teacher at a much more progressive high school just down the street from here that had a condom photo album.
Okay.
She had collected condoms,
sure.
and she showed it to her students every year.
There's different kinds, totally.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was the coolest thing. It was. Texas has been really, really iffy in terms of their sex ed, and I know that we've got some bills coming up that either require parental approval or will ban certain topics. Also, general book banning. We can't have these books. And if you look, one of the, I think it was a House representative that released a list that was like, hey, Governor, these are all the books I want banned in Texas.
So he had a little laundry list.
He had about 700-800 books on that list.
What?
I swear this man went to Google and said books with the title trans in them.
Right.
Books with the title gender in them.
Yeah.
Sex.
Right.
And just put them all on this list.
Mm-hmm. Of course, he's never read that many books in his whole life.
Absolutely.
But, yeah.
And I love, my goal is to kind of create my own library of banned books.
Yeah, right.
I have quite a few banned books, and I'm like, this is cool.
Yeah.
I recently learned, the Harris County Public Library system is actually very much against pulling any books off their
excellent.
shelf. So
I'm glad because, usually it's librarians who are right there at the front line talking about freedom of speech and, not banning books and all that. Yeah, totally.
So, this librarian I was speaking to, she said, hey, they go through a very thorough process to figure out what books are going to get on their shelf anyway.
Yeah.
There's some metric calculator system to figure out which books are going to come on their shelves. And then anytime someone complains, personally complains about a banned book, they have a committee of people to take it up, and then they essentially have this formula of they've got to read the book, and then they specifically address every single problem and claim that this person makes with the book with reason and an explanation, and they're like, here you go. Here's why we're not pulling it off the shelf. Yeah. And so they've almost never banned.
So it's very thorough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They make sure that people understand why they're not going to pull this book off, and they're not going to pull it off.
Right.
I can't promise that for every school district, but at least Harris County Public Library is doing that.
That's great.
I got to meet one of the librarians that was on this committee. Really cool. I met them at a Jewish center, so they were Jewish. But yeah, so I know slowly there are groups that are absolutely we're not taking books off our shelf. I don't know what HISD is doing per se, and I don't know what Houston's
I think in, Florida, they just took all the books out.
Oh, yeah. For right now, they're
all
we've got to slowly approve them before they go back on your shelf. And it's not approved by a teacher.
There's literally pictures on the internet of empty libraries.
It was very scary. It looked really dystopian.
Yeah.
And, low-key flashbacks of, pictures of Germany
Yeah,
before the
right.
Nazis really started taking control.
Right.
Like, it's really sad that you slowly see history repeating itself. And it,
Yeah, and that affects everybody. That doesn't just affect trans people or queer people.
Oh, yeah.
When you have an empty library, that's everybody,
So I fear that that's going to end up happening a lot more in Texas. And there are absolutely quite a few bills that are trying to do either what Florida did or do it a little bit differently. They're just trying to create that censorship. There are ones that said, like, hey,
they see what wording works or whatever that they can push it through.
Yeah. They're very, very careful. And oftentimes, like, they'll make it really broad so that people take the books off the shelves as a liability concern.
Right.
But realistically, if you took that up to the Supreme Court, like, who knew what could happen?
Right. Kind of like they're doing, like we said earlier, with the healthcare.
Right.
Like, just create a scare, and then people will move back because they're afraid.
Right.
Of liability, whatever it is. Whatever it is.
Yeah. So it's definitely... It's a scary time.
Yeah, I agree. It's pretty awful. Whew. Wow. So you are let's go over all these roles that you have. So you're a recent high school graduate, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, I graduated in 2022.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're taking some college courses now.
I'm a full-time college student here, yeah.
And you lobby the state government.
Not officially lobby, but yeah.
Okay, you're not official, but you do.
Yeah.
You do lobby the state government. You are sometimes a paid advocate for various issues, and you talk to the school boards, and you seem to be doing a lot. Is there anything I missed here? You seem to be. There's a lot going on here.
For college, we hadn't really talked about it. I'm actually...
Okay, let's talk about your college career now.
No, I'm actually... I'm trying to get into social work.
Okay.
Which is very surprising to some people because they're like, no, I would have thought lawyer, poli-sci. I'm like, no.
I was thinking lawyer too. But lawyer is something you could do down the line as well.
I could, yeah. So I'm trying to get my degree in social work.
Okay.
That is kind of the end
For
goal.
the counseling part of it, or what aspect of it?
It would be more macro social work, so
Okay.
a bit more like I'd hopefully still be able to do a lot of these like advocating kind of roles.
Yeah.
Right now I'm just taking community college classes because they're cheaper.
Yeah,
but
smart.
Hopefully a little bit later on I'll end up at like an actual 4-year university.
Yeah. Apply for as many scholarships as you can stand, okay? Aim high. Yeah. Aim high. Don't aim low. Aim high.
I definitely am. I mean, University of Houston has actually one of the top social work programs in the school.
Great.
They've had a little bit of turmoil recently. But I actually happen to know of a professor there, which I'd be really excited to learn underneath. And I'm not talking about Brene Brown, actually.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's kind of the goal, but I'm hoping to still stay in like the advocacy space. I just don't think I'll be able to do as much unpaid work.
Yeah.
And even now, like in high school, I could.
Yeah, and when I was talking about like the LGBT centers, I don't mean that people shouldn't get paid. I think that people should get paid. It is a justice issue to get to have payment, because oftentimes who gets paid are like CEOs of whatever, and then everybody else working under them is either an intern or making $12 an hour, like near like whatever minimum wage. So that's the kind of thing that I don't like. But also, I just don't like the centralization of sort of unofficial sort of policy, because I think we just need many more people speaking than gets a voice in things.
There are small organizations trying to do that kind of thing, but they're far and few in between.
Yeah.
I know a few in the space.
Yeah.
It's a difficult one because oftentimes the small
there's always tension between that, And
the small organizations, they start as unpaid kind of positions, even at the top of those organizations, and so the only people that can hold them are people of at least some form of economic privilege.
Yeah, right.
The people that
or they have
that time,
and they have their degree in hand and etc. Totally.
Yeah. Or at least the connections and the ability to have that time and energy to commit to that without getting paid.
Yeah. Actually, one of the most effective activists I know is somebody up in Fairbanks, Alaska. Hello, who runs a anti-hunger organization up there, and they actually quit high school and quit college. But they are the best person for the job in the place. They treat everybody as a peer, as somebody who, deserves respect. And so it doesn't always require like a degree.
Right.
Yeah, and I know somebody down in San Francisco who's a social worker, unofficially. They don't have the degree. Mm-hmm. But I had to talk with them because I have kind of a rough background. I was talking about my halfway house I was living in earlier. And I told them just a couple things, like a couple sentences, and they were like, oh, wait a second, you blah, 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 blah. I bet, yeah. And she had totally guessed what was going on just from very brief conversation.
There are people way more qualified to do a position that really don't have a degree.
Exactly.
Let's be about a person. It was interesting. Keshet has these positions open in Texas now, and one of them is a mobilization manager for the Southwest area. And in my head, I'm like, okay, I'd never be okay for that job like right now because I'm a student. Right. I'm doing the side work. Like I've got some small pieces of work. I'm full time. Like that's not going to happen. And there are way more qualified, like adulty people. No. And then, I started speaking to people. That's why I'm telling you to aim high. Right. I started speaking to some people, and they were like, no, that's just the patriarchy speaking. Yes. You may be qualified. Apply for the damn job. That's right. And now that would mean I'd be applying without a degree.
I'm glad that people are looking out for you. I'm glad.
Yeah. My stepmother's like, listen, this is your dream job. So if you can do that without a degree, if you can get the job without a degree, go for it.
That's right.
Become a part-time student. Do 1 or 2 classes on the side.
That's right.
So
sometimes applying for a job just shows your interest. Even if somebody else, they choose somebody else, maybe you could return and be like, oh, I see that person didn't work out. Here I am again.
Fair enough.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've definitely talked to them, and I guarantee there's a solid chance that when I apply for that job, if I get into that interview, I'll know half the people interviewing me.
Sure, yeah.
Or at least they'll know me.
Yeah. They'll know you.
No, because my face has been on a lot of articles and stuff published by them.
Yes.
And so
I hear you.
I was at a gender infinity conference a few months ago, and someone came up to me and they were like, you look really familiar. And I was like, okay, I don't really know who you are. And they said, but you look really familiar. Yeah. I said, okay, let's bring this back. Let's play some Jewish geography. Let's talk about synagogues. Yeah. Did we know each other from some Jewish summer camp? What's the deal here? Right. And what queer spaces have we been in? And we eventually come to the conclusion that they actually knew me from an article I had written for Keshet, because my face was on the article. Yeah. And they were like, oh, that's why you look so familiar. And I'm like, okay, that's really cool. Because they worked for an organization, and they had some they were the one that submitted another photo for the article. And their boss had been interviewed for the article or something. And so we were all kind of... So they
remembered who got the photograph.
Who had the other picture.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting.
Yeah. Well, you'll find more and more of that because like the Jewish community, like the community up in Alaska, activist communities are also kind of small.
Yeah, they really are.
Yeah.
I was speaking to someone, and I kind of felt bad for them because apparently they started dating someone... another lawyer in Austin, and then they broke up. But now, every lobby day, they have to see each other.
Oh yeah, that can be a problem too.
Yeah. I'm just trying to get my partner to come with me to Austin in 2 weeks. But
I would like to see some fun, there's the more vociferous and angry and whatnot kind of activism going on. But I would also like to see. I don't know if you're interested in this or anybody else is interested in this, but. Long time ago, people were having kiss-ins and hug-ins and dancing and that sort of thing. I would like to see that sort of thing as well, along with the more in-your-face stuff, because I feel like we're being dehumanized.
Something I talk about a lot, especially when I'm interviewed, is happy queer moments.
Yeah, exactly.
And so at the Capitol, they're actually having a lobby. It's not a lobby day, actually. It's this. They're just doing forms of art. Oh no, they're doing chalk. They're reading poetry. Yes. They're having a zine workshop. I was speaking to the organizers last night about it. That's what I'm trying to get my partner to go to. But
Yeah.
they're just having a fun time at the Capitol.
Yeah.
One of the things that I really hope someone's gonna do is I need someone to show up with a few drag queens to a Capitol.
Exactly.
They take like the 2 minutes they've got to just perform a
That's
song.
right. That's right.
I don't care, like Diana Ross it, full wigs and makeup. Let's do this. And then, I need a third person to come up and be like, so we've just made this what's it called? A sexually oriented business. All children out of the room. Let's go.
That's right. That's more like performance art. I love it.
Yeah, no, I absolutely we need some drag queens to do that.
Yeah.
Or some drag performers, period, to do that. I agree. And actually, here's the nuanced part about the anti-drag bills is now I know Tennessee just passed theirs, and that's a whole other story. Yeah. But in Texas, the bill is essentially like the actual wording of it is essentially any impersonator, anyone who dresses, acts, like performs in any sort of capacity in front of people, in front of two or more people, is considered a drag performance.
Okay. So that could be like a Shakespeare play.
Yeah. That could be a trans person whistling down the street.
A lot of cross-dressing in those plays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you want to perform as a drag performer, it's the same kind of rules about like stripping. So you have to have, it has to be a sexually, so if you have a drag performer, it's going to be a sexually oriented business, meaning that you have to ban minors, as well as it's a different tax thing. Yeah. The taxes change around it. So like I love that kids watch drag shows. But honestly, one of the things I'm kind of terrified for is the large performers and artists. Yeah. Like in my mind, I'm thinking about Sam Smith actually. If large performers want to come to Houston or want to come in Texas to perform, they're going to have really big problems trying to find venues that are going to allow them to perform at the capacity they want. Right. Because those venues are going to be like, I don't want to be associated and like on the same page as strip clubs. Like, I don't want to pay the extra taxes and ban the minors and have people checking IDs at the doors. But if you're assigned male at birth wearing a dress or I don't know, something with sequins, however they want to categorize, I don't really know. Because they haven't specified what's considered impersonation. Who's to say what's impersonation and what's cross-dressing?
Yeah, I mean, it's just ridiculous. If a woman wears pants, I mean, is that where we're going?
There used to be a law.
Yeah.
I remember speaking to a historian, it was a Rice professor, and he was telling about how in a club they used to, because they had really strict laws about women wearing pants. And apparently, like, for women's pants, the zipper was on the back. For men's pants, the zipper was on the front. And so in this lesbian club, they'd have, like, lights and sirens going. Anytime cops would pass by, all the women would have to switch over their pants. No. Which, I mean, sounds fun. A bunch of lesbians taking off their pants in a club.
Yeah, sure. I remember my mom had pants like that, though. And they're kind of a pain, though, because, I mean, you have to get somebody to do it for you.
That's why you have a dance partner.
Ridiculous.
No, absolutely. So you definitely, like, come to wonder what will happen if this kind of law passes. I mean,
who's going to judge that? Yeah. Are there police going to come?
That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah. I mean, are we going to go back to gay bar raids? I mean, that's Stonewall right there. That's where Pride comes from and all that. Is that where we're going? Gay bar raids?
I mean, so bars are usually 18 plus. Yeah. However, they're not always sexually oriented businesses.
Right, exactly.
So, yeah, I definitely do wonder about that and worry about that. Yeah. But also, kids should get the opportunity to enjoy drag queens. Yeah. Just going back to the drag side, and they should be able to see people perform in cross-dressing outfits. Yeah. And that wouldn't happen if this bill passes. Right. So, like, there was a protest at the Mantra Center called Drag Out the Hate. Okay. It was downstairs. They had lights, music going. Yeah. And I remember quite a few kids actually came to that. And it was the coolest thing because I knew that, like, if this bill passed, that would be one of the last times you get to see, like, kids enjoying drag. Right. And drag being on this in a parking lot, a very public area. Right. Right. It's interesting because I was at this book. It was like a book signing kind of thing. Author was there, and it was specifically like a queer Jewish Southern thing. Okay. Just the other week. Really cool. Got to meet some great people. And we were talking about this idea of at what point do you leave the state? At the beginning of the school year, like Roe v. Wade had just been overturned. We knew the elections were coming up. Yeah. Shit was going to get bad. Yeah. And it has. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And so we had this conversation of, well, at what point do we leave? And should I go should my entire family go?
Yeah.
What will that happen with like their jobs,
Yeah.
custody agreements, like all that fun stuff. And it was interesting because I had this conversation in a room of queer Jewish people, and we were all talking about this idea of, well, where do you draw the line of actually leaving the state or leaving even the country?
Right.
When do you go? Where do you go?
Right.
I was thinking Chicago.
Yeah.
But then someone from Chicago was like, I don't know about that. And I was like, well, yeah.
Massachusetts?
Maybe.
New Jersey? I don't know.
That's expensive. And New
California?
Jerseyans are weird.
It's true. The places that are safer are way more expensive. Yeah.
We don't have property tax here. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it was definitely a very serious conversation. And I've had that so many times with my parents. Because I'm not the only queer person in my family.
Yeah.
I live with other people that are just as worried.
Yeah.
Other people have uteruses. They're worried too.
Yeah, and I've interviewed people in this project who've had to move.
Yeah, unfortunately, like, there are quite a few of my Hatch friends that I've kept in touch with that have all left the state.
Wow.
And some of them because they just thought it was harmful. And some of it was like, hey, I can't get my T-shots anymore. I'm out of here.
Right.
So it's definitely...
Because in some places, in some situations, they're taking somebody who's been on a medication, who's been through extensive medical care, and just cutting off that medical care. And so the state is forcibly detransitioning people. I mean, that's so ugly. It's so ugly.
Like, even now, like, technically right now it's still legal, but as I said earlier, like, it's really hard to find and to actually receive.
Right. And then once you narrow that down, there's the waiting lists that you brought up.
Yeah. I know of, like, one gender-affirming, like, well-known doctor in Houston, but her waiting lists are absolutely nuts. And everyone knows that one name.
And then also the insurance...
Oh, yeah. Right. These bills aren't just like, hey, this is child abuse.
Yeah.
But a lot of them specifically affect, like, the liability of the doctors.
Or the licensing.
The licensing, as well as the insurance coverage.
Right.
Which is very interesting because you think, oh, Medicaid can cover conversion therapy, but not gender-affirming therapy? That's a weird one. And so, yeah, it's any small thing that harms the queer community is going to have this, like, ripple effect of larger effects you may not necessarily realize are going to happen, but they're going to happen.
Right.
And so it's just a scary time to live. And it was interesting because when I was thinking about moving, and honestly, like, I was in touch with, like, possible roommates. I was applying for jobs in another city. I was very much ready to move.
Here in Texas or elsewhere?
No, like, move out of the state.
Okay, out of the state.
And I remember thinking there was this, not overwhelming, but it was a large portion of guilt. Also, like, the survivor's guilt. Like, oh, I'm fortunate enough to be able to move, and many others cannot.
Right.
Like, it's not a cheap thing to move.
No.
And to be able to pick up somewhere else and get a job somewhere else and school somewhere else.
Right.
And so there was that sense of survivor's guilt, but also I have a large network of people I know that are doing a lot of good things in Texas, and all that's just going to be gone. What else am I going to fight for?
Well, now that you're in community college, you can make that choice down the line, too,
Yeah, there's still plenty of options.
Yeah.
And there always still is in the back of my mind, like, at what point, where should the line be where I need to leave the state?
Yeah. Right.
At first, I thought it was Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
Because having sex without abortion protections is very scary. And actually, a lot of a huge amount of trans bills actually, like, they don't directly affect me now that I'm 18.
Yeah.
They obviously have a large effect on younger siblings, on my friends.
That's not where they're going to stop, though.
Right.
No.
And so there is...
Because in other states, they've been doing that, but then they expanded up to 25, and then they are expanding it up through everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
So, it's, I think one of, like, the biggest... One of the things that I'm, like, always thinking about was, like, the overturning of Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
Because there are a few bills that I'm like, oh, I know I can't do this, or I know this won't happen because of this piece of legislature specifically. But the Roe v. Wade overturning was probably the most, like, prominent thing in my brain.
Yeah, well, it is fundamental because they have reinterpreted something that we've taken for granted as law, that, people get this right to choose.
Right.
Now, that's all up for debate, apparently, what rights we have.
Yeah. So in Texas, it makes it very scary. And I'm very fortunate to know people who, like, if I need an abortion, I go out of state. And
Sure.
I know people who have funding for that.
Yeah.
I know people who could help me with that.
I'm glad that those networks are being set up, but we shouldn't run a society that way.
No, we can't rely on underground abortion clinics.
No. No.
It was interesting. I'm watching a documentary about a group in Chicago that did that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, back then, before Roe v. Wade was a thing, it wasn't so much let's get you out of state. It was more of let's just figure out how to do it in state.
Yeah. Yeah.
And these underground abortion places. Whereas now, all the funds and all the networking that's going on in anti-choice states are just trying to get people out of the state.
Yeah.
That's what they're raising money to do, to get people out. But it's definitely a very scary thing.
Yeah.
And I know that's why many people have moved too.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people are moving around. So how should we wrap this up? What do you have in the future? You're gonna move on to a 4-year college. That's something.
Hopefully, soon.
And then you're thinking about, should I stay in the state? Which is what a terrible thing to go for an 18-year-old to think about.
See, I'll probably stay. I'm currently working with an organization that's really great. We've got lobby days coming up. We'll fight the legislative session as we do every year.
Well, it sounds like you have a lot of connection here to Texas, and that could be really useful. And, you also have some support underneath you, and that can be useful. Sometimes moving, you lose a lot of that, even though you have a national network and whatnot of people that you know. Sometimes staying in place is actually a good thing. Yeah. So I know it's a hard decision. It's a hard decision, definitely. I've definitely somebody who's moved a lot, so don't ever listen to me. If I give advice, don't listen. Always make your own decision. But yeah, unfortunately, we have a time constraint. We have to end it here. So, I'm so sad we have to end this. They're literally kicking us out, though, so we have to go. All right. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
See you later. Good night.